Welcome back to the Significant Coaching Podcast. I'm Coach Matt Rogers. You may know this week's guest more from Instagram and social media than anywhere else, where he and his brothers post daily dad jokes on Doc Talk with his younger brother Logan Lisle and his own site, Coach Says Jokes. I came across Coach Matt Lisle from his work with one of my favorite players to watch hit, Mitch Haniger, a number of years back. Coach Lisle is currently the assistant coach and recruiting director for Oregon State softball, but he's had an amazing career coaching at every level, from being a Division III head coach and working all the way up to the major league level coaching hitting for the Chicago White Sox. Both of us come from big families, and we had a lot of fun talking about growing up with siblings that are 15 to 16 years apart and the joy of having those relationships now as adults. We broke down hitting, recruiting, coaching men versus women, and his expertise and great wit did not disappoint. I encourage you to check out his website at coachlisle.com to learn all the good he's putting out into the world. If you're enjoying these conversations, I encourage you to subscribe on your platform of choice and leave me a comment with your thoughts and questions. You can always find me at coachmattrogers.com when you want more information. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Coach Matt Lisle. Hi, Coach. How are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for doing this.
No problem. Looking forward to it.
I got to be honest with you. I've been following you, your baseball and softball blog for a long time.
Nice.
And I feel like such a dummy because I just put two and two together that you're a part of Doc Talk and
Most people have not figured that out yet, so you're ahead of the curve.
Oh, it's just so great. You guys are having so much fun, and
We are.
It's a joy to watch.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's beyond whatever I expected it to be or be about. It turned into something wild, so it's been fun.
Well, that's really great. It's funny because I did just a little bit of research this week on you. I'm the youngest of five.
Oh, nice.
And I have
Logan's the youngest of seven. I'm the oldest of the seven.
So it's funny, we're on the different spectrums. I think I might be your age or a little bit older, but my siblings are all 11 to 15 years older than me. So my oldest brother is 15 years older than me.
I am 16 years older than Logan. I just turned 47. He just turned 31.
Yeah. So I'm about to turn 50 and all my siblings are in their mid 60s.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Like, so my parents are in their 60s, so
yeah, my parents are in their 80s. So I love the story simply because I was 7 years old and all my siblings were out of the house.
I tell Logan all the time, like, him and I are very close now. I only lived with him for 2 years of his life, so
Right.
and then I went off and did my life, and so it's not like we lived in the same neighborhood or anything either. So
Right.
until he was in high school, I coached him in high school actually, but until he was in high school, I did a Sunday night family dinners and stuff. So it's just weird to have where my brother, who's 44, I shared a bunk bed with him for 17 years. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's just funny how, family siblings and stuff goes. It's just different.
Well, I wanted you on because I really want to talk baseball and softball. I want to talk hitting. I've got 1,000 questions for you, but I wanted to talk about dad jokes and doc talk just a little bit because, for me, my favorite part of every clip you guys do is who's going to hold out the longest from laughing.
Oh my gosh. The editing saves me because I do almost 90% of the time. I don't know why. And him and I did some stuff, did a funny dad joke challenge on Saturday. We filmed it on Saturday. It's going to come out tomorrow, where you dunk the other person in cold water when you can't get the punchline. And I'm just laughing hysterically, like, for whatever reason. I've always been that way, like dad jokes. And for me, it's funny because I never thought of it as some social media content, but in 2013, 14, when I would coach the catchers at Oregon, on Wednesdays they had to bring me their best dad joke, and like the winner got out of conditioning that day. And then at Fresno State, before the game, I'd meet with all the infielders at third base, and just as an icebreaker, I would like come up, I would research like the best dad joke I could and
Right.
try to make them laugh. And so like it was always this part of my coaching too, and with players, and I never, again, like you never think, oh, I'm gonna share this stuff on social media or anything like that. And it's been a big part of my career. And then like I said, this thing happens. It's like, oh wow, this is a fun way to we could actually do some stuff. So
That's
anyway,
really cool. And my brothers and I, they're all grandparents. I've got nieces and nephews that are in their 40s.
that's crazy.
So for me, any opportunity I have to connect to my brothers and
Yeah.
sisters where we can do something together, because we all live all over the country,
Yeah.
it's really fantastic. So it makes my heart sing to see you guys doing this together, knowing how different in ages you guys are. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it has been. It's been. I said I don't think he realizes it much. Like he's 31, going on 21. It feels like when you're older, and just like. But it also at the same time, it's been. I said him and I went to Las Vegas last weekend to film with Netflix, and like him and I spending 3 days together and doing a bunch of content for Netflix and stuff
Right.
was really fun. And it was just so it's just like brother bonding stuff that we probably wouldn't have done before, and we never have growing up. So it's almost like you're getting like new sibling experiences all over again, which is rare at our age.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. It's so good to see. And it makes me even more excited to see what you guys put out next, just from the family standpoint. Because I had no idea you guys were all brothers.
Yeah, it's funny. I said, but in Logan, which I think was really cool of him, he from the very beginning was like, hey, I'm only going to use my brothers, and we all got involved in it, and he was really savvy about that, and so it's been cool.
Smart, smart, fun, fun, fun. So I'm excited for you. You guys got a big fan in me. And I mean, I don't talk to anybody anymore that doesn't know you guys and know and follow you. So even my wife gets into it, and she
Yeah, it's
hates my
funny.
dumb
Our
antics.
head baseball coach texted me like 2 weeks ago, who I know pretty well,
Yeah.
and he said, "My kids just showed me a video on YouTube of you." He's like, I had no idea that this was a thing and that you were doing this. Yet when I got hired at Oregon State, the first week, the head's basketball coach ran in my office. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I've been following you for a year. I love your stuff." And I was like, that was my introduction to the men's basketball coach at our school. So I was just like, it's just weird. It's a weird thing. I don't know how else
What a
to say
great icebreaker it is,
it.
though.
Yeah,
It's anywhere you go, you're always going to have that for the rest of your life. That's great.
it's wild.
All right, coach, I'm going to transition into baseball and softball.
Sounds
I
good.
was a college baseball or a college basketball coach for better part of 15, 16 years
Oh,
and
nice.
coached at the D3 and D2 level for a
Where
long
at?
time. I coached at Maryville University in St. Louis and then at the University of Laverne out in California.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I know Laverne.
Yeah. So it was fun. And so for me, my high school was so small, we didn't have a baseball team. We
Huh.
didn't have enough
My,
players.
my high school I graduated 260 kids in our school, but we definitely had a baseball team. But
Yeah, I
uh,
think we were about 30 less than that. I think we had 230. And our
wow,
track program was so good. Our track coach kind of kept baseball from ever becoming until I left. And then they started baseball. So all I had was Legion and Colt ball.
that's funny.
So I just assumed there was no chance for me to play college baseball because we didn't have a high school team. So I went and played college basketball. But baseball's always been my love.
That's funny.
And so anytime I can have a baseball coach on, I love talking baseball. So I'm going to throw a quote at you. I'm sure you've talked about this. I'm sure you've heard it. But George Brett a couple weeks ago said, I'm going to quote this so and get your opinion on it because I've watched your talks on hitting and I want to get your thoughts on it. He said, I get in arguments all the time with hitting coaches and players today. He said, my bat was always coming through the zone on the same plane as the ball. That's why I didn't strike out. Nowadays, players strike out all the time because their bat is in and out of the zone on the same plane as the ball for a short period of time. He says, I will go to my grave vowing that my theory is better than they're teaching now. What's your initial thoughts on that when you hear George Brett say those things?
My initial thoughts are don't ever argue with a Hall of Fame hitter. That would be my first thought. My second thought is that I agree with him 100%. In the sense of what he was trying to do and what he's saying is good hitting. the part where I disagree, or there's some disconnect for me, is that I really do believe that all the good hitting coaches out there right now are teaching that like the swing plane is equal to the pitch. And so like, fastballs are coming in at like, let's say, for example, 12-degree angle, or, it changes by pitch and
Okay.
things. But like, let's say the pitch is coming in at 10, 12 degrees. I do think that the best hitting coaches out there, and most hitting coaches that are, worth their weight, are teaching to match that plane. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think that, 10, 15 years ago, totally agree that, swinging down and all of these things that, that a lot of coaches were teaching, um, or swings in and out of the zone. So like, I agree with him in the sense of like what he was trying to do and like what's the right way. I would disagree that like I don't think there are hitters that are doing. I think hitters are actually really good at swing plane now. I think better than any time I've ever been around hitting for the last 25 years. I think this is the best time for swing plane that we've ever had.
How are you guys at Oregon State, and where you were at Oregon, you've been everywhere. How are you using analytics and film to help the kids see that plane and find it? Is that a big difference from where it was when you and I were kids?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's night and day. I was in charge of the hitting development analytics for the Chicago White Sox, and from every level, pro on down, everyone wants to know their data. They want to be able to use it. For me, a huge unlock. I would say in 2016, 17 was probably the time that I worked with the most major league hitters. Had like 50 different guys that would come in spring training, before spring training, and without permission, and as my wife, I bought a HitTrax machine. And this HitTrax machine, I used all winter with our hitters, and I was using it for the sake of like development, obviously. But what I learned was when you put a bunch of high level athletes or even 12-year-olds in the same room with HitTrax, and you get all their data, all of a sudden this like competitive culture, like the buy-in, like everything becomes really, it changes. And so like I think in the old days, in the cages, high five somebody, oh, that was a good hit, that was, and like it's all subjective, and it's all, we think that was good, but now we just have all the data. And so with blast motion sensors, hit tracks, and Rapsodo, and everything we have now, it's just really easy. Data is easy now. Interpreting it and teaching it, that's what I think where the biggest problem we have in baseball and softball now is you have people who don't know how to interpret the data, and that's a whole other topic. But I do think that we use it every day. Video, blast motion sensors, hit tracks, exit velocity. I mean, at Oregon State softball right now, we record every BP. You can see every ball is hit. It's got exit velocity, bat speed, launch angle, everything. And we can use that to not only track and evaluate, but we can develop plans with it. And for the most part, 90% of the athletes love it and they get it. And some, I've worked with different major league guys. They don't want to know their data. They don't care. They just
Yeah,
want to feel good, see the ball, hit the ball. Doesn't matter. And you have others that are really, really want to get into it.
that's what my worry is. My ADHD would kick in, and I would take all that data, and my head would get away from see ball, hit ball. Do you have
Yes,
kids that?
you've got to be really, really careful. I work with a great example is over the years I worked with hitter Mitch Haniger with the Mariners, and like Mitch is really smart, and you can give him all the data you want, and like he gets it, he can process it, and like have the conversation. And I won't name names, but I got some other MLB guys. It's like you just can't do it. Like if you're saying it just overwhelms them. And so what I have learned is like everybody's different. And like even at the college level, I've got hitters that like love to have the conversation. They want to break it down. And sometimes they shouldn't. Like you got to kind of cut them off. But I think the best hitting coaches out there for the most part, they do very little talking. They do very little teaching of breaking down the analytics and the data, and they just set up the environment, whether it's a constraint or a drill, or like, they're asking them to execute something with as little teaching as possible, and just letting the hitter see ball, hit ball, and figure it out within the constraint of that, whatever you're trying to get them to do, like hit a high fly ball or do this or
Yeah,
hit the ball hard. I think the best coaches learn, hey, I know Matt Rogers, he gets overwhelmed if I give him a bunch of data. So I'll hold on to the data, and I'm going to create a program for him to excel in where I don't have to talk about the data, but I know, what's going on in the background. I just want him to do his thing.
I love that. That's great. You just reminded me how I found you couple years ago was Mitch. Mitch was one of those guys that I just loved his swing. I still think there's an MVP in that bat. I really do.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, I started working with Mitch 2016, which is so funny. His story is so funny because I met with his agent maybe the end of 2015, between 2015 and 16. I met with him and his agent. I broke down his swing over video,
Yeah.
and we went to Starbucks, and he's like, "No, I disagree with all this, and I don't think that's what the problem is." And then like July of the next season, I got a call like, "Hey, maybe you were right on all this stuff." And like we've been close ever since. And if you look behind my shoulder right here, like these are the cleats he wore in the All-Star game. He signed them and sent them to me, and we have a great
Awesome.
relationship. And he really like he's a perfect example of someone who high skills, but needed to make some changes and was able to do it. Very smart, and just unfortunately for him, he has had the least worst luck
Oh, terrible
possibly with
luck.
injuries. And I think, I think as a fans don't realize with athletes at that level, like how much injuries affect swings and all this
Yeah.
stuff and all the things. And it's been a tough road for him the last couple of years. And I also hope that he can get 100% healthy someday. But, as you know, as we get older, it just
Yeah.
gets harder to get back to our prime self a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, I hope he gets that opportunity to be healthy and be in the right situation. He's one of my favorites to watch swing the
Me too.
bat. I'm rooting for him too. Coach, you're a little bit like me. I coached men and women for a lot of years. I coach both sides. Basketball, it's a little bit easier. It's typically, it's basically the same game, a little bit smaller ball, but it's pretty much the same game. As a hitting coach, you're dealing with a pitch angle for a baseball player up here and then for a softball player down at the knee. How have you had to adjust as a pitching coach going from one to the other?
It's actually not very much. Like the actual angle of descent of the pitches are very similar. I mean, you could probably get in the weeds of arguing like 1 or 2 degrees left. Like the attack angle, I mean, the angle is steeper out of the hands for sure, but like the descent as the ball's coming in from a swing plane standpoint, it's
Right.
very similar. I would not change anything between a softball hitter and a baseball hitter in the sense of their attack angle and their swings. I really wouldn't. The equalizer, unfortunately, which I mean, it's fortunate for me, is that the fences are 200 feet. So,
Right.
if you were to get under a ball a little bit because you had a little bit steeper attack angle than a baseball player, like baseball players got to hit a ball 400 feet, 330 feet, and softball it doesn't. So at the Division I college level, you have to hit a ball about 68 miles an hour in the air, the right angle at 99% of the ballparks to get it out of there. I have never worked with a D1 player that can't hit a ball 68 miles an hour. So
Right.
whereas the college D1 college baseball level, which I've also coached at, like you're gonna have guys that can't hit home runs. Like it's just
Yeah.
not gonna happen. So like it's the approach is more like, hey, now if softball fences were moved back 50 feet, it's a whole different conversation in a lot of ways. But
Right.
I really don't think the hitting. There's nothing I changed really between baseball and softball and going back and
Interesting.
forth. There really isn't. I don't change anything.
That's great to hear. That's exciting to hear. It's obviously a different game in terms of the size of the size of bases in terms of length from home to first and third. What's the transition for you when you're teaching slapping and bunting and kind of looking at these kids and going, this is where you can get on base, this is where you can be a run producer. I imagine that's greatly different.
Yeah, it is a little bit. I mean, honestly, I think people who've known me from a hitting standpoint will always say like I don't like bunting. I love bunting in baseball too.
Yeah.
I don't like sack bunting. Now you have to remember like I don't coach youth baseball, so it's a whole different ball. So for me at the Division I level and pro level, like most sack bunting is not that productive in some scenarios, but like drag bunting, push bunting, like I think people have to understand the philosophy of hitting. Like every hitting coach, or especially if you're a team hitting coach, your philosophy should be get on base and do damage. It's not just do damage. Like you actually like the get on base part, like drawing walks and like like walking is a huge piece. Like vision training and be like having plate discipline and all these things, and like drag bunting, push bunting, being able to do these things like slapping. If you can have these tools on your belt to get you on base, like that's what it's all about. The object of the games, both games, is to score runs. Not
Right.
like who can lead the team, who can have the most doubles today. And so for me, it's really about like doing those things very well. It's like drag bunting, push bunting, things like that. Like being very technical and really good at those things. If you have someone who's fast, like that to me is really important. So I think you got to have all those facets of the game. Now, again, like we have some players who are large and slow and hit lots of home runs. Like that's not part of their tool belt, but
Right.
I think every hitter should be able to find ways to get on base. And if you're one dimensional, you only have power and you can only hit doubles and home runs and you can't draw walks and you can't lay down bunts. I mean, you have value, but it's not as much as someone who has more tools.
I talk about this way too much when I have baseball coaches on, but when I think of baseball, and I'm a Cubs fan, so this is hard for me to say out loud, I think of the 82 Cardinals. And I think of the speed up top, being able to hit the other way, being able to hit behind runners. And, there was a ton of sacrifice bunting. That's kind of been eliminated pretty much in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
What is the reason that has changed as much as it has, where you see a guy like Kyle Schwarber, who's going to hit 40 home runs, maybe bat 200, is now your leadoff guy. You got a guy like Ohtani, now for the Dodgers. I mean, you never would have saw that 10, 15 years ago. How do you see that? The strengths and maybe
Yeah,
cause of that?
I think the hard part for most fans or people involved in baseball have been around the game a long time, is just understanding like the object of the game is to score runs. And
Yeah.
like we have so much data now that we just know that from a run production standpoint, certain things have just more value.
Yeah.
And so like it's hard. I get it. Like for me, baseball is way more fun when it's played like the 1982 Cardinals.
Yeah.
Like ball. I wish every batter put the ball in play, and there was way more action. There was less strikeouts, less walks. I'm all for that. I 100% agree. But we're talking about like professional sports where money's being made and teams have to win. And it's like we've learned that like walks and home runs and power and doubles, like the OPS, these certain things have higher value.
Yeah.
And so it's just tough, like giving up outs for sack bunts and all these things. And so it's just hard. Now, I think the game's going to continue to change and evolve. I think that like stolen bases and like moving runners, like these are things that could change the game if we can find ways to continue like to improve stolen bases. And we can challenge teams to create like try to do more things to put the ball in play and these type of things, getting rid of this the shift and the different things. So like to me, those things are valuable, but in the way the game is designed right now, there's more value in a Schwarber and Ohtani leading the top of the lineup
Yeah.
until they, really find ways to change things like that. But here's the thing: I think, I'm not a big fan of sack bunting, but I will say this: every Division I coach or every college coach that's out there knows that like defenses still make errors, and they make errors on bunts a lot of times too. So
Yeah.
for me, like there's this kind of middle ground of like, I don't want to sack bunt here, but like we know that this third baseman doesn't feel the ball well. So like I know the percentage chances of him, even if we sack bunt, it still has a higher percentage. So it's tough. I mean, it's tough. Except for me, I think I have more fun coaching softball because the ball is in play a lot. There's a lot
It
more
is.
action. And
Yeah.
the game is very fast. Where baseball, I love baseball. Obviously, I've been since out of the womb, I've loved baseball. But the way the game is played at the pro level right now, they know what scores runs and the value and the players. And until that changes or they find ways to put more balls in play, it's just not going to be a great product for a lot of people. And I hopefully it changes.
All right. So for your Oregon State Beavers that are listening, I promise I'm going to come back to softball because I know they're listening and want to hear Coach Lisle talk softball too. But I'm going to make you the skipper of the White Sox. You've lost 100 games already. What would you have done differently with that team? from a hitting perspective?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if you really could do much. I think the one thing I've learned in professional baseball I'm a player development guy. I love player development. I
Yeah.
have worked with players that I have seen go from average to making millions of dollars like that. I am solely bought in, and I've seen it at the college level. I've worked like we had a player last year hit one home run the year before, hit 9 home runs last year, and I 100% believe in player development. Having said that, there's something that it's hard for my ego to admit a lot of times is that at the major league level, the cream rises to the top, and like you're not going to turn many average players into all stars, and so you could improve things. Maybe they lose 90 games instead of 100 because
Right.
the development's a little bit better, the coaching's a little bit better, but like at the end of the day, at that level, talent wins. And like as much as we want to focus on now, I think at the minor league level, and like I think it's all kind of adds onto each other and builds up. But if if I was the GM of the White Sox and I wanted to win 100 games, I'm going to go out there and spend the money and buy the best players I can buy, and that roster is going to win more games than a roster that has the best development coaches in the whole. Every you take the best coaches on every team and combine them, they're still not going to win as many games as the team that has the highest payroll, and that's just the way it is. And
Yeah.
so I think you can improve things. I just don't think you can change things all around. I think it's hard at the major league level with managers and hitting coaches and all these guys. Like they have a bad streak of a month or two and bad season. The guys get fired, and it's like maybe they would have won them one or two or five more games. But I really believe that, and I would say 10 years ago I didn't believe that. I really felt like player development had more value. But again, if I have Otani and I've got Judge, and I'm going to win more games than the guys who have the best coaches on the team. That's just
Well,
that's just
my,
reality.
my Cubs have been the epitome of that this year, firing their coach and paying $8 million for a new coach, and
Yeah.
basically having the same results with the same team.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does help a lot. Like, especially at the college level, younger players at the major league level. I think like a good manager can help you win a few more games. The good culture in the clubhouse, all of those things, I think have value.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you get a great coach that really can make a huge difference. But again, you can only get so much out of these players. Each one has a ceiling to some
Yeah.
level, and if everyone is at their ceiling, it's still hard to win 100 games.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into recruiting here in a bit. I'm going to pick your brain on that. Um, I've been a shooting coach, basketball coach for 27, 28 years. So it always drives me crazy when a family will come to me and they've got a kid that wants to be a really good basketball player and they've hired a shooting coach. And I go, tell me what they started with. Tell me what the shooting coach started with. And they'll say, well, they really worked on his elbow and his follow through right from the beginning to get that set. And for a shooting coach, that drives me crazy that they started with the upper body instead of the lower body. Because for me, anybody that shoots the ball, it's all about your foundation. If you don't have a solid foundation and you're not starting from the ground up, you're never going to be a great shooter, no matter how good your follow through is. You might become a decent shooter, but you're never going to reach your potential. And I was lucky enough when I was coaching in St. Louis, this was the early days of Albert Pujols when he was a Cardinal. Albert would be in my gym every single day. So I got to watch Albert hit. I got to talk hitting with him. And his foundation as a hitter at 22 years old was absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah.
When you're teaching, and I've heard you speak on this, when you're teaching a softball hitter, a 17, 18-year-old that just landed at Oregon State, where are you starting from the hitting perspective?
I would say really it's really really individualized. I would say like every hitter is so different. And so for me, we start practice next week, and the first week will be all evaluation, blast motion sensors and exit velocities, and it'll be zero instruction. And we'll take 500 swings and we'll get all this data and we'll say, okay, here's where you're at coming in, and like here's where we want to be. How do we get there? And I think every single player is just so different. I would say that at the youth level, that like you're kind of talking about foundation, the starting point of the swing is really really important. Having a good base and being athletic. Like if you start I always tell our kids, like a 12, I've got young kids. I tell them like, all right, if I was to race, two kids were to race each other, and they're 11 years old and 11 years old, and one kid he starts backwards and he's facing the other direction, and then the gun goes and you take off. Like, who's going to most likely win the race? The person who started like in the right good position. So at the young levels and young ages, like that's really really important. So I would say at the older levels, like 17, 18, like they usually have some pretty good setup in the sense of most things. Maybe it's a tweak, but it's like, how do we make this hitter the best hitter they can possibly be? And like Matt Rogers and Matt Lisle might have entirely different ways of doing it. I've got to find the best way for you to get better, and then the best way for someone else to get better. And so I would just say the starting point is just different for every single person.
Yeah.
And it could be the lower half, top half. It could be literally anything. It's just like, what's the smallest amount of things I can inject to make you better without trying to overhaul your swing or
Yeah.
all these things. Like what's something I could make it really easy that will make a little bit of a difference, then we keep building from there.
Well, when they get to you, typically they've already been studs for 4 or 5 years. They've already been the best player in their club and their high school, and they're already coming in with a sense of confidence in who they are. I would imagine when they get to you, it's all about maintaining that confidence and helping them grow that confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I've had to give this speech so many times to at different levels of like, you got here because you were good.
Right.
Like, it's like I have to remind them, you got here because you were one of the top players in the country. And so that's what got you here. So don't forget that part of it. And I think for most hitters that I come into the equation, like even major league players, the conversation is more like, do you think you have the ability to get better? Or do you believe that you've reached your ceiling yet? I've never come across a player that said, yep, I'm good. I think I'm the best. This is the best I've ever been. It's the best I'll ever be. I haven't come across too many of those. Most of the time, I have hitters say, I know I'm really good. I've had a lot of success, but I want to go to the next. I want to go to that. I want to be an All-American, or I want to be this, and so for me, but having said that, it's funny. To me, the biggest difference to me in softball and baseball, with going back and forth at high levels, is that softball is really low hanging fruit. You have athletes who are incredible athletes, and their talent got them there very much. But like, there's where they're at to where their ceiling is so far apart versus baseball. I think baseball players, like, let's say they come in a scale of 10 is their ceiling, they'll come in at a 6 or 7, and they can get a little bit better. But I come across softball players who like are some of the best players in the country. They're Division 1 level. They come in and like their ceiling is 10 and they're like a 3. And it's like, oh my gosh, like if you could learn how to do X, Y, and Z, oh my goodness. And then like I said, I've seen it. If it was one or two players, like, I think that would be like, oh, okay, sure. But like I have seen dozens and dozens of hitters that I have worked with go from like 1 home run to 13 home runs, 1 home run to 15 home runs, or gone from a regular player to an All-American in one season. Like the softball and female athletes that I have had the experience of working with, when they come to see me, for the most part, they are very, very short of their ceiling. And to me, it's really fun. Whereas in baseball, like I said, I've had a few players like that, but in softball, I have seen really incredible gains. And to me, it's pretty fun.
What I love about what Coach Berg has built, what you guys are building at Oregon State, when you look at your roster, this is what's amazing to me. And I was a college scout for a long time. So Division 1 softball, you got a 5-4 outfielder, 5-5 infielder, 5-5 infielder, 5-4 outfielder, 5-2 outfielder, 5-2 outfielder. I mean, you're not judging a kid on their size at all.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen a Division 1 roster with that many girls under 5'7".
Yeah, I mean, I would say honestly, like if you're looking at last year's roster, we did have a lot of shorter players. I would say we hit the portal pretty hard this year, and we're much larger. But
Are you? Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think what I've learned, I mean, softball especially, but baseball as well, especially the college level, athleticism usually can trump a lot of things, and it can and have a ton of value. So I love taking athletes and trying to improve them a little bit because they already have so many of the tools that we
Right.
don't have to like teach them how to be athletic, because that's I'm not going to be great at that at the college level, but I can teach an athletic person how to move pretty quickly. And their learning curve is usually way faster.
How much are you involved on the recruiting side, Coach?
All of it.
You're doing all of it.
Yeah, I pretty much run the recruiting.
Tell me, tell me where you begin when you start the recruiting process. Are you looking nationally? Are you looking at club? Are you looking at high school? How many of your girls are coming to you and saying, "Hey, I'm interested in you"? What does that look like? I know it's probably changes from year to year.
Yeah,
Where do
well,
you guys
honestly, it's
kind of
changed so
start?
much in the last 5 years. It's not even funny.
Yeah,
But I would say generally, especially in softball, it's all club. The world has changed. I mean, baseball is the
yeah,
same, but like when I first started coaching, we would watch high school games. It does high school. I don't even know where any of our kids go to high school. I mean, it's everything is through travel ball. You very rarely see coaches even at high school games anymore, especially it's because it's our during our season.
right.
It's all ran through the clubs. Yeah, nationally, I think a lot of players reach out. I know that sometimes in some levels, like camps get a bad rap for some schools, but like everywhere I have been, camps have been a place where we invite the best players, we get players coming, and if you are trying to get seen by coaches at a school, now if you go to a camp and you're not, great and you don't do well, then like that's not a great showcase for you. But if I have signed so many players that didn't know a lot about or a little bit about. They come to camp and you're like, okay, this player, like, and they're right in front of your face. You get to really see them up close and personal. So camps, I think, is a huge way to do it. But obviously, it's hard. I'll tell you this: I speak at these camps all the time, and they say, "Can you Q&A?" And the kids ask questions. What do I need to do to stand out? All this stuff, and I know you probably did the same thing in basketball.
Yep.
And over the years, I've had to say to them, okay, I don't mean to be rude, but at Division I level, at the end of the day, you have to have talent. You have to be good. And so
Yeah.
like the having great effort and attitude, that's the given. You like that's the like lowest barrier. Like if you can't do those things, then they're not interested anyway. But like that's not going to get you to this level. Like, and so I tell hitters, like if I came to a game and you hit 3 home runs, you have my attention. Like obviously, that's an over exaggeration, but I think players seem to forget that we want to have good attitude. We got to be a coachable, all the things. We preach it, preach it, preach it, but you actually have to have talent as the higher levels go. Like you and I are not playing in the NBA because we don't have that level of talent. And at
Yeah.
some point, talent is the thing. And so I think for a lot of parents, it's hard to hear that sometimes. So for us on the recruiting end, we go watch a tournament or watch a club team. Like it's easy to go. That girl right there is the best player on the field, and that's who we want. So it's hard because I think a lot of times parents don't want to hear that. They don't understand that. Now, again,
Yeah.
we're talking about the highest levels. I've coached NAIA. I've been a head coach at D3. I've done all of those levels, and I think every player that I've been had a showcase like has the ability to go play at a D3 or NAIA somewhere. And there are schools that need players, and so that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like what are we looking for? We're looking for talent. We're looking for the best players because like our jobs are on the line and we want to win, and that's part of it. So nationally, locally, we're just looking for the best players. But I would say, thanks to the transfer portal, the world has completely changed. It's really changed baseball and softball and everything. And I think the transfer portal for coaches gives us the ability to evaluate athletes that have already had experience at the college level.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing like that. You take risk on a freshman, you have no idea. I mean, their talent level, but if we've got a couple players coming in this year, we brought in 18 transfer portal kids. We brought in 18. They're probably
Wow.
more than any team in the country. And a lot of them like were starters, are all conference players at their Division I school. And I can look at their data and go, they've hit 30 home runs over their career. Like I know that she can hang at the Division I level, so it's like the ability to compare her to the 5 freshmen we have coming in, we don't know. Like the transfer portal has given us the ability to really evaluate somebody, and again, having someone that what their abilities are versus their potential, it has changed the game in recruiting. And for me, I would say going forward, we'll spend a lot more time recruiting the transfer portal than we will recruiting high schoolers. And that's just the nature of it until the portal changes. But like this year, I think softball had at least 1,000 people in the kids in the portal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. So
All
I think
right,
it's
coach.
changing.
All right, Coach Lisle. Let's save some lives here. Let's save some feelings. There's a ton of talent out there that's 17 years old. Every college coach, it doesn't matter if I'm talking to the coaches at Purdue for football, the coaches at Oregon State for softball, the coaches at Texas for volleyball. Every single coach I'm talking to at the scholarship level is talking to me about they're putting 99% of their time into the portal when it comes to recruiting. Because why would I go get a kid who's unproven?
Yep.
Where I can go get a kid that somebody's already put strength and conditioning into that kid, taught him how to work, how to handle a 45, 50 game season, how to hit a 6'2" pitcher who's throwing 70-mile-an-hour curveball and then dropping it down to 58 on a changeup, and it looks just like it. What are we telling these high school kids and these families about their future? Because all these kids you're getting out of the portal were high school kids, every single one of them. So what do we tell these kids and their families about this journey?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that for athletes who are already at their colleges, like you better be very confident that when you go in the transfer portal, there's a new home for you. Because I can tell you, I know of dozens, and there's probably hundreds and hundreds of athletes who thought the grass was greener. They went into the portal and they did not find a new home, and they
Right.
quit softball or quit baseball, or they left a Division I school and like they're trying to find a D3 or a JUCO. So be 100% sure that when you're going to go in the portal, it's for a good reason, and you're not just like, oh, the grass is greener. The athletes that didn't go in the portal for our team this year, we had two really good pitchers, really good pitchers that stayed, and all Americans. I mean, the ability to be all Americans, and they had both been transfers from other schools, and they're like, I'm not going in the portal because I know what it's like. So I don't think athletes know what it's like, how hard it is,
It
unless
is.
you're a top tier player. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing is I think these parents just have to change their expectation of what the college journey looks like. I've coached at the JUCO level. It was the most fun year I've ever, some of the most fun years of coaching I've ever had. Athletes they're really hungry. They love to learn. It's a whole different ball game than a Division I level. So I would say that parents just have to understand, like, going to a junior college or an NAIA school or something like that, like these are not bad things, and like there's no stigma of them. Like, I go where you're gonna have a great experience. And so for me, if it was my son and I thought they were gonna be a Division I player, and maybe they were 5 years ago, and now they're not because of the portal and everyone's changed the way they're doing it, then I'm going to find them the best junior college to go to and develop it. And like, I think you're going to see at the pro level at every sport that, like, in 10 years from now, like they've all went the JUCO route. They've all gone to NAIA D3. I think it's just going to change. We're just so used to the way that things are that everything looks different. So if it was my son or daughter, I would figure out what's the best fit for them right now. And maybe I know it's hard to say, like, at the Division I level to say this, but if it was my son or daughter, I would, and the only option was an NAIA or like something like that, I would say, hey, go there for a year. Maybe you'll love it. Like, maybe that's a great school, but maybe you have a great year and like you want to transfer you want to try to go up to Division I or try to I'd be okay with that too. Like, I'm okay with the teams using it as lower levels as a springboard to go to the next level. I think parents should be okay with that. I think coaches who should be okay with that too. Like, hey, what's the best thing for this kid? What's the best experience for them? What's the best thing? That's what it should be about. So if I'm all for telling my kid, you know what, you can have a great experience to go to a JUCO, play really well, and then guess what happens? Now you have an opportunity to move up and do that. And to me, that would be a way better way to do it.
I'm with you there, and it's taken me some time to come around. I just a good friend of mine is Jeff Culver at University of Colorado Springs, and he was the only coach to offer Derek White, Olympian basketball player, just played on the Olympics, got a gold medal. He was the only coach, Division II, NAIA D1, to offer Derek a scholarship out of high school. Well, Derek transferred after 2 years because he was really good and went to Colorado and ended up being a draft pick. You look at UConn baseball. I think the number I saw was 9 Division III kids
It was
transferred
awesome.
to UConn last year and
Yep.
played in the College World Series.
Incredible. Yeah, I would just say I think a few years ago, and I think for a lot of people like that both of those stories is tough because I'm with you 100%, like the loyalty thing and all of those things. I totally, and
Yeah.
if I'm that coach, my feelings are hurt. Like
Yeah.
if I'm a Colorado Springs basketball coach, my feelings are very hurt because
Yeah.
you invested in the kid, all those things. But I would say this: I get it, and I would be upset, and I would be hurt, and all this. And if I'm all the coaches of all those Division III players at UConn, at the end of the day, though, like I really think the best coaches really like the reason why we coach, the reason why we do this versus the jobs that pay much better money is that the reason we do it is for these athletes and what's best for them. So if an athlete was to, if I'm the Colorado Springs coach in that situation, like I gotta be upset, I'd be frustrated,
Yep.
all of those things. But when the dust settled from that,
Yeah.
I would hope that my feeling of like this is what the best thing for like this is what he wanted, this is what was best for him, or whatever he felt was best for him, and like I'm gonna root for him and cheer him on in that
Yeah.
sense. I think it's hard. Like I said, maybe 10 years ago when I'm younger, I would not have felt that way. But I really think that, like, are we really about the student athletes and what's best for them? If that's the case, I'm at a different level and they want to move up a level or transfer to a better program, whatever the thing is. Yeah, it hurts my feelings, but at the end of the day, I want what's best for them and I'm rooting for them and cheering them on. And yeah, do I wish that they stayed with me? 100%. But I hope that in the maturity of all my years of coaching, that's the one thing I think have shifted gears on a little bit.
Yeah. I'm really coming around. It's taken me some time to really buy into the good of the portal and how healthy it can be. I'm still worried about the red flags, like you talked about, kids not having a plan when they jump in the portal or haven't really invested into that coaching staff the way that coaching staff hoped they would have. So there's still a lot of coaching and teaching and mentoring that needs to go on, but I'm with you.
Yeah, I just think it needs to. It's going to have to keep evolving. Like
Yeah.
the rules of it right now. There, I think tampering is just out of control. All of those things. I think we're going to have to figure our way out with the portal, but we're it's at a good start. But there definitely needs to be a lot of changes going forward.
All right, I want to talk to you about one big change, and you've given me great time, Coach. But I, I think this is such a brand new rule that I really want to get your thoughts on it. It seems to me that the NCAA has just kind of thrown their hands up and said, "Okay, we're so tired of these lawsuits. We're so tired of dealing with all this. We're just going to make a big change." Football went from 105 or from a lot of Division I schools for football were carrying 130 kids. I don't know even how they found the lockers and the helmets, let alone trying to keep that many kids happy. But now the NCAA is capped the rosters at 105, and instead of 85 scholarships, you can have 105 football scholarships at Oregon State now. Okay. Crazy. Now we're talking about the portal. Now there's 25 kids. If I had 130 kids on my roster going into 2025, I can only have 105. That's another 25 kids in every program that are now in the portal. Softball is the exact opposite. You had a roster scholarship cap at 12 full rides. Next year, it's going to go to 25, and your roster is going to be capped at 25. Right?
Yep.
Am I reading that right?
Yep.
What does that do for your program and how you recruit going forward?
Yeah, I honestly I think for the Division I coaches, I'm very curious to see what schools do with that 25 number. I think a lot of schools will stay at 12. I think some might go to 15, some might go to 20. I mean, I would be happy with 20. I don't think you need to carry more than 20 players in softball, at 22 maybe at the most. That's just
Right.
my personal stuff. I would say it just makes our jobs a little bit easier. I mean, I'll tell you what, the amount of time that I spend in spreadsheets and breaking down the cost of attendance, and you're negotiating deals like a used car salesman with families, like what can you afford to pay? And here's a 60% offer. And like
Right.
taking that off the table and just being like, here's your scholarship. I think for softball coaches and baseball coaches and across the board,
Got to be a
like
dream.
it's a dream. Like we've been talking about this for years. Like we're so jealous of like basketball and football where it's just like,
Yeah,
here's your scholarship. And you don't even have to talk about, I mean, we spend so much time with parents like, okay, well, what can you afford? Well, this school is giving me 80%. This school is giving me 40%. Like that whole thing. Oh, it's so not fun. So for me, it's just a huge weight off of our shoulders of like not having to be a salesman and like negotiate
right.
prices of the school. That would be the biggest thing. I think it's gonna, just like everything else that's been happening in college sports the last few years. The rich are going to get richer and the poor are going to get poorer, and it's going to continue to create a divide. I think it's best for the student athletes. I don't think it's best for the sports. I think what I love about college baseball is that the Coastal Carolinas and the mid majors and the Fresno states have a shot to go to the World Series. I don't think that will be the case anymore when this happens. And I think that it's already happened. It's been that's been the way in softball all along, but in baseball, with having 11.7 scholarships in these 35 to 45 rosters, like you can't hoard all the best players. And now you can. And I think it will be the death of mid majors. So I said, I think it's best for student athletes. And I think it's best for a lot of programs. And they're going to, like the money situation is going to be so much better for them. I think for a lot of mid majors that are not going to fund 35 scholarships or baseball or 25 for softball, whatever it is, because of the costs, that's going to create a bigger and bigger divide. I think it's a conversation for a whole nother time, but I think the power four is going to break off and do their own thing relatively soon, 5 years,
Yeah,
10 years, 2 years. I don't
yeah,
know, but I think that Division 1 NCAA will become like the mid majors and the lower majors, and the Power Four will be its own world. And I think we're heading that direction fast, or I think it'll be its own separate entity. And to me, I'm all for that because I do like I've coached a lot of mid majors, and they'll never be able to go to College World Series or go to be able to win a national championship because of the new stuff that's going on, NIL and all this stuff. So I'm all for a separation of like, hey, here's what the Power Four have, and they have all the money and all the scholarships and NIL. Cool, that's great. That's like the professional level of college sports. But like everybody else who's at a more equal playing field, I personally would love that product. I would watch it. I would be invested in it. I would like it just as much. Versus, I don't want to. It's not fun watching uh, a team that has all the resources in the world and money, beat up on a team that
right.
doesn't. And
Yeah,
uh,
it's a shame.
yeah,
I really, I think the great evaluators of talent are going to rise to the top.
yes,
Because I think if you're that coach that says, yes, we're gonna use the portal to its fullest extent, but we know what we're looking for. We know what a great 17-year-old pitcher looks like. We know what a great 17-year-old outfielder looks like. We know what their character is, what their work ethic is. We study those things. We put time into those things. We may bring in 4 or 5 transfers every year, but we're going to bring in 4 or 5 great freshmen every year, and we're going to coach the heck out of them. I still think there's that world, and maybe I'm naive.
no, I really do think that my feeling going forward, ideally, is that I think you're going to have teams that are half and half. Like
Yeah,
they're going to bring in a group of freshmen, and maybe not like it'll be half the size as before, and they're going to have this really good balance of players that they can develop and hopefully have for 4 years and do a good job with, and be able to bring in some talent at the upper levels or older ages. I think the teams that would have the most success will really be really balanced in that scenario where I think, the fun part about professional baseball, like we talk about talent rises, but like the Yankees don't win the World Series every year.
no,
And the Dodgers don't win the World Series every year, and their payrolls are so like there is context in all of that, right? And so like
yeah,
you can have the best team in the world, you can bring in the best portal class and still not win. Like there still are a lot of other factors involved in
yeah,
chemistry and culture and all of the things and coaching and those things are still factors. It obviously gives you a huge leg up on everybody if you have all the talent, but it doesn't guarantee you success. And that's why we all love sports. That's why we all watch games and we cheer for teams, because it's not guaranteed that best team is going to win at the ballpark. And that is the fun of coaching. That's the fun of sports. Why we all watch it and cheer and love upsets. And to me, my favorite sporting event in all of sports is March Madness. I'm glued to basketball, especially those first 4 days.
yep,
And just because you're rooting for the underdogs and the
yep,
storylines. And if the best team won all those games, March Madness wouldn't be March Madness. It would just be March Vanilla. And we would all just watch the games and go, okay. So, you know, all that to say, I think the teams that will still find good balances. I think they'll still, it won't be all portal kids. They'll still find ways to do it right.
Yeah, if I give Matt Lisle a kid for 4 years instead of one, I think that kid that gets you for 4 years is going to be a pretty good ball player at the end of the 4 years.
I appreciate that. And I think it's hard because athletes don't realize that if they had stayed with that coach for the 4 years, they would have gotten better and better and better. And if they bail after 1 year, it's more difficult to do that. So for me, that's a tough one. As parents and coaches, you got to do a good job of communicating with your athletes and letting them know, like, hey, I'm invested in this thing and wanting you to, and you try to save a few of those. In our portal situation right now, we had a player that left in the portal and was kind of following some other friends and stuff. And then I ended up having a conversation with her of like, hey, you got so much better this year. Like you have so much potential. Like, come back, let's finish this thing together. And she did, and I'm really really excited about that. I'm really excited for her. And so I think more coaches can do a better job of trying to figure out, okay, the grass could be greener, but like, stay with me for a little bit. Like, let's try to finish this thing together. I think you can still do that.
Fight through some adversity, see what happens.
Yes.
Coach, really appreciate you. We're doing a thing called 1 minute coaching. And I'm just going to give you this question, and I want just I know you've done this 1,000 times and been in front of so many families, but in a 30-second, 45-second clip, what's the best advice you would give to a baseball, softball family going through the recruiting process? And I know you've already given me some things about transferring and the portal and thinking about that, but what's the best piece of advice you give to that teenage and their family?
For me, the best advice that I would give them is to like really really invest in the development piece as much as you can versus just the exposure piece. I've seen so many families that have spent all of their money showcasing and finding out like there's not showcasing very good stuff. And I would say if it was I was thinking of it just as one of my kids, I would spend that money on development and talent, getting as best as help them reach their ceiling the best as possible. You still got to do the right things, like be proactive in the process. Like, the world has changed. 20 years ago, like college coaches aren't coming to high school games just looking for talent. But you want to be on the best travel ball team that you possibly can get and get the most exposure that you can get for what you can afford and what is good for your kid. And so you have to be proactive to an extent. But again, I think parents forget the development piece and spend too much time on the exposure piece. Like, it's got to be really balanced. You got to really spend time on the development piece, get as good as you can, because I see kids who are on travel ball teams that they're not good enough. Like, the talent level is way too high. They ride the bench. They get exposed because they aren't great. And so get to the highest level that's going to push your kid, get the most exposure, all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to actually evaluate your kid and be like, okay, you know what? He's not as good as we thought he was, or he is this. And I am going to spend some time like getting them better. And so focus on the development and the exposure stuff. It'll show up, but don't tip the scales too far to the exposure side. The next thing you know, like, you have no offers and no one is interested because you forgot to focus on the talent.
That's great. It's great advice. Coach, you want to talk a little bit about CoachLisle.com and Doc Talk and
I would just say, if you're a baseball or softball parent, check out my website, thehittingvault.com. The best way to explain it is it's a master class for baseball and softball hitting. It's not just swing mechanics. It's the mental game. We talk about recruiting. If you want your hitter to be better, it's a course that I developed for walking in. It walks you through, holds your hand. Even if you're not a parent that knows a lot about hitting, like, you can buy it and still be able to. I would say that's the biggest thing. And if you want to follow me, I'm at Coach Lisle on everything, Instagram and Facebook and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And if you want a giggle every day and watch Coach Lisle with his brothers, dad jokes, Doc Talk, Coach Says jokes, it's all hilarious. And thank you for doing that. And I just love that you're doing it as a family. It's so fun for me.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Appreciate having me on, and it was very fun.
Coach, it was a pleasure. Good luck this year. We'll be following the Beavers, and I know you guys are going to do great, and have a great winter, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Matt.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Significant Coaching Podcast. I'd like to thank Coach Matt Lisle for sharing his great family stories and his great perspective on coaching and life. I could have spent the entire episode just talking family and dad jokes. That was another fun conversation. I hope you laughed and learned as much as I did. If you're enjoying these conversations, please click that subscribe and like buttons. If you're interested in working with me or scheduling me to speak at your school or organization, you can schedule a free strategy session at coachmattrogers.com. Thanks again for listening. Have a significant week. Goodbye until next time.